All right, let's go. Hi, and welcome to my winter reading list. I am Jess. If you've not seen my videos before, I'm a slow reader. I don't read much. On average, I read about 1 or 2 books a month. So seasonal works for me. I've got 3 months to dibble and dabble. I'm a mood reader as well, so I like to have a little bit of everything. I am not normally a winter girl. I am a summer girl, but there's something I feel like I'm trying to romanticize about winter. So I'm picturing me on the couch, candles burning, my playlist going, I've got my hot tea, and I'm just cuddled up reading a book. And that makes me really happy. I have definitely felt more drawn, I guess, to plot-driven books, which aren't normally the books I pick up. I'm normally a character-driven literary fiction reader, but yeah, I guess in colder months I do want something a bit more plot-driven, maybe something spooky or something with a bit of mystery. I always think in summer I read a lot more, but in summer I socialize a lot more at nighttime, whereas in winter it's too cold. Unless I'm going to the cinemas. I love going to the cinemas in winter. Speaking of cinema, last night I went with some girlfriends and watched Finding Emily, and it was so good. Felt like a mix between Angus Songs and Perfect Snogging and How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. I'm going to get into these books now before I waste any more time. I'm going to begin in kind of a weird place with my current read. So this is the last book that I read for autumn, and I've only got a little bit left. But in autumn, I read The Idiot by Elif Batuman, which, if you have not read, centers a lot around language. And from there, I then read Babel because I was seeing RF Kwan talk at Sydney's Writers' Festival, which was so good. And out of all RF Kwan books, Yellowface should have been the one that I read because it's her literary fiction. Instead, I wanted Babel. Babel is set in Oxford, which is my favourite place in the UK. I used to live in Birmingham, and Oxford was an hour's train ride away, so I went there whenever I needed to pick me up, whenever it was my birthday. It was my favourite place to go. This book talks a lot about language, and in particular translation. So I felt like it was a really good jump from being kind of inspired by language from The Idiot to then reading Babel and kind of tweaking my curiosity to becoming about translation and translators. And so from here, I don't have the book because I've just ordered it, but I was looking up Polly Barton, who is the translator of Butter, which is one of my favorite books from last year. And I knew that she had just come out with a fiction book called, I think it's What Am I, a Deer? And it's been getting really positive reviews. And so I was going online to check that out because I'm inspired to see if translators of books I've liked have written any works of their own and reading their personal works. And so I went online to try to see how much it was really. And then I noticed that because Fitzcarraldo carry her work, that she had 2 white covers, which if you know Fitzcarraldo, you know their white books are non-fiction and their blue books are fiction. And so I thought I would just have a look to see what her non-fiction titles were. And she has a book called 50 Sounds, which is all about her journey of moving to Japan, learning the language and culture, and becoming a translator. And that just felt so magical. It was the next step for me in this translation rabbit hole that I've kind of gotten into, and I'm trying to read in a more flow-like state now. Instead of just reading a book and putting it down, if something interests me, I'm trying to just create a web, I guess, and letting myself look up things, and I'm actually allowing myself to buy books when it comes to this because it's just sparking up such a curiosity, and I feel like it's feeding me in a way that I would be fed if I was studying. Oh, that's really annoying. I didn't realize my... Hold on, I'm going to close that. Anyway, that is the first book that I will be reading when it arrives. Muriel Sparks' The Driver's Seat. So I heard about this book years ago. I listened to a podcast called Highly Enthused. They don't actively record anymore, but they do have about like 70-ish episodes. And if you live in Australia, I highly recommend it. Basically, the podcast is these two women called Sophie, and they just recommend a bunch of things. One of them works in the food industry, so she gives great cafe and restaurant recommendations. One of the girls mentioned The Driver's Seat, and when Penguin published these amazing little editions for, I think it was their 90th birthday, I believe, I was going through their catalogue and saw The Driver's Seat and had to get it. This book, to my knowledge, follows a woman who I believe isn't fully there. And she's about to go on a holiday, and there's a lot of foreshadowing about this really violent event that is going to occur. The girl from the podcast said she was extremely happy when she finished the book because it just felt so claustrophobic, but by the end of it you just kind of want out of her brain. The next book I have is Out. This book follows four women who live in Tokyo. They work the graveyard shift at a factory, and one of the women kills her husband and the other three women before her. From there, I think things start to snowball because of the murder, and they get themselves in a bit more trouble than they originally bargained. The Door by Magda Szabo. If you have been following me on Instagram, TikTok, you probably have heard me rave about Abigail by Magda Szabo. It was so good. If you liked the movies, The Sound of Music, and Wild Child, you should read it. This book follows two women and their relationship to one another, platonic relationship. As far as I know, platonic relationship. One of them is the housekeeper and the other woman is the employer, and it's just meant to be a very unsettling portrayal of their relationship. My sister, for Christmas, I asked her to wrap up 12 books from my physical TBR, one for each month, and this was her January pick for me, but when I read it, I just decided that I would rather read this in colder weather, so I paused it, and the weather is finally cold, so I'm picking it up. Another chunky one, Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy. This is going to be a challenge, but what better time to set a challenging read than winter? Last year was the first year that I actually started reading classics again, and I've had to kind of slowly work my way back through modern classics and then slowly working my way up to actual classics. I don't actually know when this was published, but I think the earliest book that I've read is still the 1800s. And I think even at that, it's the late 1800s. But yeah, I'm excited to read this one. I think I will start this as soon as I finish Babel, because I think this will probably take me the entirety of winter and maybe a bit of spring to read. I don't want to rush it, and I would also like to learn through this reading experience. So if there's an event, like a historical event they talk about, I would like to then read up on it. Bluets by Maggie Nelson. It is literally all about the color blue. It is in these vignette styles. And I think this will also be a book that I dip in and out of. What better time to read about the color blue than winter? I mentioned that because of The Idiot and Babel that I've started going down this rabbit hole about language and translation. And I did, before I ordered 50 Sounds, have a look through my shelf to see if there was any other books that I owned. There wasn't, but I did find Deborah Levy's Things I Don't Want to Know, which is the first book in a 3-part autobiographical series of hers. This one is in response to George Orwell's famous essay Why I Write, and then talks about Deborah Levy's writing process, writing journey, I believe. So I was going to see if I could get a copy of Why I Write by George Orwell, read that, and then pick this up. I probably still will do that, but finding 50 Sounds obviously has become the priority now in reading. But I have been wanting to read this series for a while. in particular, I really want to read her second one, which is The Cost of Living, which I believe follows her journey into motherhood. And as a mother to a toddler, anything about motherhood, I'm just instantly drawn to. In light of everything going on with AI, I think I'm finally at a place where I'm ready to embrace internet novels. So these two books don't deal with AI, but they are about the internet, and I have tried so hard to not read any books about the internet because I don't know, just like some people don't like reading about COVID, like if it was too soon, reading about the internet I have had the same reaction to, but because everything just keeps progressing and I feel like I can't go on my phone now without hearing some new news about someone using AI, I think it's time that I finally start reading books about the internet. So I have these two books on my shelf. I have Information Age by Cora Lewis, which was kindly sent to me by Joyland. It follows a online news journalist who is reporting on the technology, the economic state, and the politics of the 2010s in America. And it also is in vignette style, so I thought it would be a nice digestible book for me to read. I have Fake Accounts by Lauren Oyler. But this book follows a woman. At the beginning of the novel, she is in a relationship with a man, and I believe that he led her to believe that he is against the internet or against having a social media presence, and then through snooping through his phone, she finds out that he's actually a very famous conspiracy theorist. I don't know why that felt so like, oh. Anyway, from there they break up and she moves to Berlin and she enters into this own game of online manipulation where she goes on dating sites and I think other online sites and creates false profiles of herself. And yeah, these are my two internet novels. Daisy Johnson's Sisters. This is another pick that I'm not in a hurry to get to, but if I feel like reading something that's a bit faster paced and a bit more plot driven, this was the book that I pulled out. It follows two sisters called, I think, June and April, July and September. And I think they have a bit of a complex relationship with their mother. The next book I have is a bit of an interesting one. So I follow this girl on TikTok. I'll put her profile up on here, and she is a professor at Cambridge. I think she's an art professor, but she speaks a lot, and the reason I found her was she posted a kind of ultimate gothic reading list. And then she's got like 19th century, 20th century, French Gothic, German Gothic, like she breaks it down into different lists as well. And so I have been really fascinated by Gothic literature. So I think I'm kind of using her TikTok account as my own personal curriculum. So this is the first book that she said started the genre. It's actually quite a small book. The book itself is small, but I think the actual story is only about 95 pages. But the interesting thing about this book is Horace has built himself a castle which resides in, I think, an hour away from London. And so Rebecca as well posted about going to visit this place, which I think is so interesting. My husband is British, so I say regularly, every other year we go to visit his family, and so I really want to read this. Even if I don't like it, I still want to take the trip. I think it's in Summerhill, or it's called Summerhill. I can't remember, but I then want to take the trip myself to actually go see this castle he created, because I think that is so cool to take my reading experience kind of outside of the walls and actually go see something for myself. So this book follows a king, and I think it's on the eve of his son's wedding. His son dies unexpectedly, and so the king decides to marry the bride himself. And from there, we've got a castle riddled with secret passages, ghostly visitations, violent combats, and I guess all the tropes that would be included in a gothic novel, which I'm not familiar with, but yeah. The next book I have is Shirley Jackson's We Have Always Lived in the Castle. I have read Dark Tales, which is a short story collection by her, which I love and recommend. But everyone talks so highly about this book, so I thought it's the perfect time to pick it up. This follows, I believe, a daughter who is accused of killing her family and now lives with her uncle. I like having a bit of a selection for myself, just so that I can try to stick to the books that I've put on my list. So I have picked these two books as my memoir picks. So I've got The Years by Annie Ernaux, which was on my autumn reading list, but I never got to it, so I've just put it onto my next pile. And then I've got the Copenhagen trilogy by Tove. Ditlevsen. That's definitely wrong. So it's got childhood, youth, and dependency. So if I do decide to pick this book up, I am not committing to the whole book. I am happy to just read childhood and leave it as that. Then I have a non-fiction book. I have Scream with Me. So this book combines horror with gender studies. So I read The Female Persuasion by Meg in autumn, and that has really inspired me to read more gender study books. Heard about this one through someone on Instagram, but I cannot remember who posted about it. But basically, this book was written in response to the reverse of Roe versus Wade. But this is such a unique book because it combines horror with like I said, gender studies. So through looking through horror movies like The Exorcist, The Shining, Rosemary's Baby, the author tries to show how horror movies aren't just about shock horror, etc., but actually a mirror to how society holds and thinks about women. I do enjoy horror, but I'm very selective with my horror, and I haven't watched most of the classics. So if I want to kind of do something extra with this book, I probably would then watch the movies that it talks about. So this is a non-fiction pick. The other book as well, which I'm also waiting for because I've just ordered it, is Girl on Girl. And that again is a gender studies book, and in reaction to the overturn of Roe versus Wade. But in that one, it talks about how the turn of the millennium turned a generation of women against one another through ways of reality TV, social media, pop culture. So that one is really interesting to me. I'm a 96 baby, so that was a lot of my childhood. I have very fond memories of watching The OC come out and seeing reality TV shows, watching music videos on Channel V and MTV. So I love a nostalgic kick, and I think that's a really nice balance for me because I don't read a lot of nonfiction. My nonfiction up until this year has just been memoir or essays. So I think getting more into nonfiction works if it's books that I pick up that I have a genuine interest through. So through horror films or through nostalgia. So I'm excited to read those. Then I have Matrix by Lauren Groff. I have read Florida by Lauren Groff, which is a short story collection and one of my favorite short story collections. Follows Marie de France as she, I believe, becomes a nun and starts to train the girls in her abbey to fight. What does it say? Teaching sword fighting and dagger work, she sets a bold new course for the nuns she leads, bringing herself and her sisters into richness and power. Daphne du Maurier's Jamaica Inn. I read Rebecca last year and I really liked it. This book follows a girl called Mary who seeks refuge with her aunt Patience at Jamaica Inn. Her aunt has a very domineering husband and there seems to be a lot of fear that engulfs the household. It says, in fear of her life and disturbed by her powerful attraction to the aunt's husband's younger brother, Mary is soon plunged into a brutal world of smuggling and murder in which she can trust no one, not even herself. Then I have The War. I've been seeing this circling around social media, and even though, like I said, I'm trying not to give in to a lot of the social media hype or books, this is a book that really did catch my attention because it sounds like a book I would enjoy. So we follow this woman who decides to go visit her friend and her husband, and while she's there she wanders through the forest one day and comes across a war. She then is curious and steps through the war but doesn't realize she can't get back out, so she's stuck on this other side of this war where it's just forest and nature, and she has to make her own way through life. It's not like a fast-paced one, it's a very like slow, mundane book. I mentioned that my sister wrapped up 12 books for my physical TBR for me to read each month. My May book was Strega by Joanne Like Home, but I never got a chance to read it. We follow a young woman, I believe she's like 1920. She goes to this remote alpine town to work at a hotel, and from there I believe this like really unsettling event happens. One of the girls or a few girls go missing, and it just sets in motion this unsettling, eerie tale. I then have Hooked. Like I said earlier, I read Butter last year and really liked it. This is the latest book of Azako's that has been translated into English by Polly Barton, which I've obviously spoken about. This book follows a woman who works in the seafood industry in Japan. She becomes really fascinated by this housewife who loves food, which feels very much like butter, but this obsession becomes a little bit insane. Just how far will Erika go to hold on to the best friend she's ever had? Because it's set in Japan, because I read Zako's last book, I know how food heavy it is. So reading about warm Japanese food is going to be great. I love reading about food. I attended Sydney's Writers' Festival last month and it was so good, but one of the sessions that I attended was a session about translation. It was called Found in Translation, and on a panel was Bora Chung, who is the author of Cursed Bunny, which I've read and loved, and also Mariana and Enriquez. She's the author of The Dangers of Smoking in Bed, which I think most people are familiar with the cover. I have The Dangers of Smoking in Bed on my e-reader, but I didn't realize at the end of the session there was a book signing. So I ran to the bookstore and bought a copy of a book to get signed. I picked this one because it is blurbed by A.K. Blakemore, who is the author of The Manning Tree Witches, which is one of my favorite books. Highly recommend reading, especially if you like good writing or if you are intrigued by the witch trials. This is a collection of short stories, and I don't plan on reading it cover to cover. I think I'm just going to pick a couple short stories and read them. I'm thinking this might be a book that I keep in my nappy bag or car, so if I'm ever nap trapped, I can just pick this out and start reading it, because I do want to read her books because I'm obviously very inspired after hearing her talk. But with short story collections, obviously it's really nice because you only have like a few pages to commit to reading, and yeah, with a toddler you never know when you might need when you might be nap trapped. So I think this is going to be a book that I will read a few stories of throughout winter. Because it's the 1st of June, I was able to open the book that my sister wrapped for June, and it is Winter in Soko, which I'm very excited about. A young French Korean woman works as a receptionist in a tired guest house. One evening, an unexpected guest arrived, a French cartoonist determined to find inspiration in the desolate landscape. The two form an uneasy relationship. When she agrees to accompany him on trips to discover an authentic Korea, they visit snowy mountaintops and dramatic waterfalls and cross into North Korea. But he takes no interest in the Soko she knows. She's pulled into his vision, and taken in by his drawing, she strikes upon a way to finally be seen. And then I will have 2 more books over winter. my July and my August book, and I do know what they are, will be Elaine by Atessa Moshfagh. I love Atessa. If it wasn't going to be Eileen, I was going to read Lapova. The book will be Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. I know there's been a lot of news and conversation surrounding Olga. Where I personally stand, I haven't actually read the article, which is going to be the first thing that I do, but I do know that Drive Your Plow and a lot of the books of hers that have been translated into English were written years ago. I think potentially Drive Your Plow was actually written in the 90s or early 2000s, so they aren't books that involve AI. It might just be a situation where if she does use AI, I don't support writers who do use AI. So will just read books of hers that were published before. I feel fine with that. I'm happy with that. Even if I never read a newly published book for the rest of my life, there's so many backlist novels that I'm set. So that's okay. I'm not truly devastated. I will be truly devastated if I find out Sally Rooney does. I don't think that would ever happen, but she would probably be the one I'd be devastated by. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you have maybe found some inspiration for your for your winter reading. Maybe I've introduced you to a new book, a new author. Maybe I've intrigued you with some of the non-fiction books that I've spoken about. But yeah, excited to start reading one of these. Let me know what you're reading this winter, or if you've just entered summer. But yeah,